everyone. This is State Representative Kate Lipper-Garabedian. Thank you for joining me for our Conversations with Kate. For the purposes of those listening, we are recording this on Monday, June 6th, and I'm sharing that date because this is a time-sensitive conversation that I'm having today with Rina Schneur from Moms Demand Action, where we're going to be talking about the tragic gun violence that continues to rack our nation and ways in which we can be responsive as policymakers and as advocates seeking a more peaceful, safe, and healthy environment for our families. So thank you so much for joining me, Rina.
Thank you for having me, Kate.
Absolutely. So Moms Demand Action, for those who may not know, is an organization that works to support efforts to educate policymakers as well as the press and the public about the consequences of gun violence and to promote efforts to keep guns out of the hands of criminals. Moms Demand Action has focused on efforts to require universal background checks on firearms purchases, and it also produces really significant research and studies on gun violence. For those of you listening who've reached out to me, I think it's helpful to set a little bit of context about what the status of our gun safety laws look like here in Massachusetts. Certainly, mass shootings can occur anywhere, and yet they are less likely to occur here in Massachusetts. Thanks in part to strict gun control laws, our state has the lowest per capita rate of firearm deaths in the continental United States. And that's in large part because of a good number of gun safety laws that we have here. Our minimum age for a license to carry is 21. We require renewals of license every 6 years. There are safety courses and education courses that license holders must complete. We largely require that when you travel with a firearm, it has to be unloaded. We have a gun portal for tracking guns. And in 2018, we enacted a red flag law that allows family members and others to alert local law enforcement if they are seeing concerning behavior that might necessitate intervention for a gun holder. So those are some of the examples of our state law framework. We also continue to invest in violence prevention and intervention programs in the COVID-19 recovery law that was signed in December of 2021. We included $50 million for those types of programs, including reentry programs and youth employment programs. We also added $15 million for grants to cities and towns to create and expand pre-arrest co-response programs focused on strengthening mental health responses for people in crisis. And we know there's still work to do. So you'll see among the many bills that were filed this legislative session, a good number around gun safety, some of which I was proud to co-sponsor. Those included one that would relate to 3D printed weapons and ghost guns. That bill is still in contention for being signed into law this session, and I'm hopeful we'll get something to the finish line. Another that was filed relates to prohibiting manufacturing of assault weapons and large capacity feeding devices, except for sale to law enforcement, military, or government purposes. So we know there's work to do here. And Rina, I'm really glad that you're here today to share some of your suggestions for my own personal learning and for those of our listeners. And of course, we also want to focus on what can be done at the federal level or in other states that do not have the same level of rigorous protections that we're trying to keep here. So thank you again for joining me. And maybe you could start out by just sort of introducing yourself and your connection to Moms Demand Action and the work of the organization.
Okay, so my name is Rina Schneur, and I joined Mom about 5 years ago. I decided after Sandy Hook that that's something that I must volunteer my time to try to make a difference. And I've had a couple of roles since, and I'm co-leading the chapter in Massachusetts, the chapter of Moms Demand Action. Just want to emphasize that we are a grassroots organization, so we are all volunteers, and we are supported by every town for gun safety, which is kind of the umbrella organization.
Great. And talk a little bit then about, what are the priorities for the work? We're watching horrifying massacres in Buffalo recently and in Texas. What are some of the priorities of Moms Demand Action in terms of greater gun safety here in Massachusetts and, nationally?
So we work in various aspects of gun violence prevention. Here in Massachusetts, we focus on advocating for various measures, legislation, specifically in each session. And then we also do the same on the federal level. With different means by contacting sometimes or helping other states and of course advocating with our congressional delegates to vote for gun sense laws. We also work a lot in supporting and advocating and our community organization partners. They are doing the hard work every day on the ground, and we support them with advocating for financial resource, other resources, and just amplify their visibility. As you mentioned, they're doing a lot of work in the violence intervention.
Right.
Which is critical. And then another aspect is education, educating the public about gun safety. Safe storage is prominent among those. And we actually at this time go district by district, school district by school district. We had a couple of great successes this year when school districts really adopted a resolution to promote awareness within the parents and the school officials about gun safety and safe storage.
Oh, that's really great. Can you speak specifically about some of the legislation that are priorities? You mentioned every session you're looking at the bills that are filed. You may be working with drafters to file specific bills. Can you give a sense of an example or two here in Massachusetts of ones that are front of mind for you?
Yeah, so I guess in very front of our mind is, as you mentioned, the same bill that deals with ghost guns.
Yes.
And ghost guns that are, those are either the 3D printed firearms or ones that can be purchased via a kit and just be modified pretty easily. And we have seen a surge in ghost guns presence in Massachusetts. So we, as you mentioned, are very hopeful that this will pass. For the audience, the cycle, the legislative cycle in Massachusetts, it's 2 years. So we need to, these bills were filed in beginning of 2021, and we hope to get them into a vote and to pass them this summer. Another couple that I would mention, one is to have live firearm training, require that when one applies for a firearm license. People may not know, but we are kind of behind in not requiring live firearm training, a few hours of that. I want to say also on ghost guns, one of the reasons we are here is because we need to catch up with technology.
Sure.
Make sure the technology does not undermine all these great laws that we have already established in Massachusetts.
Right.
And another bill that we've worked, the live firearm training and also a crime data analysis bill, we've worked on those in the previous cycle. They made it almost, but then COVID came and a lot of the bills were stalled. So the crime data analysis is a bill that we in Massachusetts have collected data about the origin of crime firearms for quite a few years, I think since 2014. Okay. But we have not analyzed it to get some insight. My background is data analytics, so kind of makes sense to me to analyze, get the insight so we can see what we should do, how to prevent or reduce those.
Right. I mean, you want data to drive future policy or the education programs you put together. So that makes all the sense in the world. And thanks for putting that on my radar as well as the listeners. So that's really helpful. My office, I'm not on the public safety committee where the ghost guns bill, I believe, is, but we share office space. So we have Julia, my legislative aide, and I have heard them working on this topic. So I'm really hopeful that there's some momentum building and that we could get something over the finish line this session. So thank you for all of your work on those bills. I know also you have very welcome partners at the federal level when it comes to our congressional delegation and gun safety. And you mentioned that Moms Demand Action not only has each state chapter and you're working on state legislation, you also advocate at the federal level. And anything you'd want to sort of discuss there that might be of interest to listeners? What are some of the things that you think are possible? I understand I don't live in DC, I don't work there, but everything you read says there's such gridlock on a topic like this. But do you have a sense of if there are any components of the larger policy initiatives that you're leading on that might have some potential here for federal legislation?
So we are very hopeful. I know that they are working on it now. We are very hopeful that we can pass background checks for all gun sales.
Yes.
Again, we have background checks, but we don't have them for private sales, for sales in some markets, or for, as we mentioned, definitely people can have ghost guns.
Right.
So we need to make sure that there is background check for every firearm sales, no matter how it's done. And there is a process to do that. We also need to close some loopholes. So
Okay.
there is what's called the Charleston loopholes that talks about a waiting period when a background check is made. We need to close that loophole. There is also the what's called the boyfriend loophole in the Violence Against Women Act, that we prevent a spouse, let's say, if they have a restraining order, from purchasing a firearm. But if it's not a spouse, a married, the couple is not married, let's say a boyfriend, that's why it's
Sure.
called that. We don't, and we need to close that loopholes. And of course, a lot of discussion was about red flag laws. You mentioned that we passed that in Massachusetts in 2018. We were, I think, 7th state to do so.
Okay.
There have been other states that have passed it since, but we need to make it a national law.
Okay. Those are very helpful and digestible to be thinking about. I remember there's been a lot of analysis, to the point of analysis, looking at, tragedies of mass shootings over the last, decade, 5 years, what have you, and identifying how many of some of these policy levers that you're referencing would have made a difference in many of the cases that we're seeing. So this is a great menu of examples of things we should be leading on.
And I want to say that they definitely would make a big difference in those, but they would also make a big difference in the over 110 people that are killed by gun violence every day, from
That's right.
domestic violence, from crime in cities.
Yes, death by suicide, right? A family member call with a red flag. We were seeing, I think the Boston Globe was just reporting on it this week. A number of people have, been suicidal, and their families have been able to reach out using the red flag law to basically save their lives. So very, very helpful. One thing we were talking about before we started recording is we're waiting on a Supreme Court decision that certainly will come out this month as the Supreme Court completes its session. There's a challenge to a New York ordinance, I believe, a New York City ordinance, which requires that applicants for a handgun license show, quote, proper cause, quote, for handgun ownership. And Massachusetts has a similar standard, I believe, for license holders. So if the Supreme Court strikes down the New York City ordinance, people are writing that that's going to impact a number of state laws that have a similar framework. I'm interested if Moms Demand Action is sort of following this case, and any insight you might be able to provide would be really helpful.
Yeah, so there are 7 other states in addition to New York that have similar law, and Massachusetts is one of them. Every town has a group of policy makers and law or legal group that, of course, is watching it very carefully. It will be very hard to know what the impact exactly will be until the final language of the Supreme Court decision will come.
Right.
But after that, if in fact they are ruling against the New York State, we may need to amend some and strengthen some of our laws in Massachusetts. One thing, for example, and one law that in fact we support, is prohibiting firearm in some public places like polling places.
Okay.
That's a bill that we support anyway, but will come even more critical if that Supreme Court ruling is against New York.
There's a thinking there in part that if you have to demonstrate sort of a level of a necessity or a rationale for why you might prohibit in some places. A place like a polling location maybe has heightened understanding of why you would have stricter limitations in place. Is that the thinking?
Well, I think if we cannot require that anymore, the need to justify, then we need to maybe prohibit altogether firearms. And I think we need to do it anyway.
Right, I see what you mean.
From places of contention, like polling place, there
Yeah.
may be, it's a ripe ground for arguments and contention.
Okay.
We don't want firearm to be in that environment.
I see. And you're absolutely right to qualify this and say we have to wait for the decision, both what is the final holding and then what is some of the, what we call dicta, the language around the holding to sort of then inform our own work. Again, I think you'll see, at least in our state, a responsiveness and a willing partner in the state legislature to adjust as necessary to continue to be as, provide as safe a common sense gun laws as possible. So I'm glad to know that, and not surprised to hear that you're working with you have legal support to be ready to be prepared to respond. That's great. So I have heard from a number of constituents. Someone came to my office hours in person to talk about her despair about what's happening and what can she do to be involved. And it sounds like you have your own personal trajectory of being involved in Moms Demand Action. How could other people who are listening right now who want to support the work that you're doing or other like-minded organizations, what are some ways that they might get involved to advocate for some of the policies that you're discussing or be involved in the education initiatives that you're leading on?
So let me first start. If somebody is very new to it, have not done anything, somebody has not engaged with us, you can just text ACT, ACT to 64433 and you will get on the list and we will connect you. You'll get into the Massachusetts team and we'll connect with you and you will get our communication. So text ACT to 64433. But if you are already engaged or has been engaged, want to re-engage, one thing that we constantly do is advocate with our lawmakers. As we said, Massachusetts is great with our legislation. We certainly need to do more. And so we advocate with, you mentioned that your office is nearby the Public Safety and Homeland Security.
Yes.
We know the members and we meet with them and we write them and we call them all the time. And then when it goes out of committee and go to Ways and Means or to a vote, we are constantly in touch with our state rep and senators. So we want to make sure that you can do that because they want to hear from their constituents, not from a general group. Of course, one aspect of the advocacy is funding for violence intervention groups as well. The other part on education, so as I mentioned, we go school district by school district. If you want, we have a great kind of toolkit and guidance on how to go about reaching out to your school committee in your district and start the process. I would also pitch for the lawmakers in Massachusetts. Maybe we should do it on a state level rather than go school district. School districts is very tedious. It takes time and a lot of effort, and you need to find somebody that knows, that want to do it in their particular school district. If we do something on a state level, that may make it definitely more robust. Another thing I want to kind of pitch in that, we passed the red flag laws. We started to educate the public about it, but we have also as much capacity as we can. So would be great to strengthen the education level of red flag law, their existence, and how people can actually use them in Massachusetts. They have not been used as much, probably as much as they should have.
Okay. Those are all really good ideas. And I think probably people listening may identify many that they might want to pursue. So that's really good.
And I have one more.
Great.
As I mentioned, our senators and the focus now is on the Senate, but all of our congressional delegates are very supportive but we are as good as our neighbors and other states. We don't really have borders.
Yes.
So if you have family, friends in other states, tell them to text BOLD, BOLD, to 64433. That will connect them to their senators, to urge their senators, to pressure them to pass gun sense laws. Now we have this new campaign that's called Don't Look Away.
Yes.
We ask the Senate to not look away this time.
That's great. Well, and Rina, you don't know this, but I'm from Virginia. I have many friends in the South, slightly different legal framework. And I was talking to some of them just last week and I said, well, have you talked to your state legislator? And they said, oh, and I said, and also your federal legislators. Oh, right. So very good reminder. And maybe just one follow-up on that. You know, you're co-lead for the Massachusetts chapter, and there are chapters all over the country. Are you working in concert with, you know, your colleagues in other states, you know, that are really have maybe a different dynamic with their state legislatures right now?
Yeah, so we all work together, and sometimes we help other states. We have a colleague session where we actually organized by every town, few times a week. You can join that calling session and you call voters and supporters in other states, urge them to contact their delegates.
That's great. That's really helpful to know. So thank you so much for giving our listeners a lot of ideas of how to get involved. I look forward to hearing hopefully from many of them, because these bills are going to get reported out favorably. And to your point, then they'll come to the House. I'll have a chance to vote on them myself. And, you know, we unfortunately keep waking up or seeing on our phone these alerts about, you know, terrible incidents. And to your point, many of the incidents of gun violence in our country go sort of underreported because they're not headline grabbing, but they're every day, you know, over 100 people. And despite all that, you know, you're still in this role, you're still identifying opportunities for improvement. And so maybe what gives you hope when it sometimes feels as though we're just in an intractable situation?
So I'll give you two areas. One is just looking here in Massachusetts. The data shows that you know, we have strong measures and we have the lowest gun death rate in the country, with 3.5 per 100,000 per year compared to about 12.2 nationwide. So on one way to look at it is right behind each of these numbers, there are lives lost and many people impacted. But behind the difference between these two numbers, there are lives saved. So we have done a lot of work already and in saving lives. It's just that, you know, of course, it's harder to pinpoint. The other thing is, I think the narrative in the country has changed. The atmosphere has changed. If you look from Sandy Hook until now, and keep changing. And one evidence that gives me a lot of hope is that in the past 2 weeks, we've had thousands of people in Massachusetts joining as volunteers. And that's really tremendous. And people really stepping up, say, how can I help? I want to organize. I want to lead. I want to act now. And that gives me a lot of hope.
Well, I'll take that hope with me as well. So Rina Schneur from Moms Demand Action, I really appreciate the time today. For those who are listening, again, you can text ACT to 64433 if you're here in Massachusetts. You can also text BOLD to 64433 elsewhere to get involved in this conversation. And again, thank you for your work, and I'm glad to be in touch and to remain in touch as we continue to work on this important issue. Thanks everyone for listening, and be well.
Thank you very much.